Hey, everybody, welcome to the Commercial Construction Elevate the Industry podcast series hosted by yours truly, Dave Procida. Thanks for joining us today. It's a special one. This is episode number 1. I've been in the business as a contractor now for almost 4 decades. I've done work at the Pentagon, at the Chase Center on the opposite side of the country, World Trade Center, the DC Convention Center, and many, many more. Okay, what that qualifies me for? Well, I don't know, but I'm going to share it with you. Things like how we do things and why we do things. If you're in the commercial construction industry, this is a podcast for you. You're going to be better off after the series than you were before the series about where you're going and how you're going to get there. I am currently the owner and president of Adacorp Construction Services, LLC, based in Fairfax, Virginia, and we provide consulting services to the commercial construction sector. You're going to find out about all the things that we do, but the purpose of today is to talk about my journey so you can know a little bit more about me. And this kind of serves as a backdrop because the idea of the podcast is that you can learn through the experience of others. In this particular case, it's me. So let's start from the beginning. So I grew up in South Jersey in a town called Lindenwold, the Garden Lake section. Just outside of Philly, maybe 15 minutes. I was a big Philly fan. I still am. Go Eagles. But had 4 siblings, 3 brothers and a sister. My parents were great, different generation, right? My dad worked from 6:30, was home at 4 every day. We had dinner at 4 o'clock every day. It wasn't the early bird special, but it could have been. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. They loved us to death. I would describe them as supporters. They supported us in everything we did. There was never a sporting event or any event that I was involved with that they weren't there. And I'll never forget that. They would drive 3 hours to watch me play basketball in college, and that's just the way they were. They weren't leaders, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just different, right? Today's generation maybe handles things a little differently. I probably parent differently. But, I love the life that they afforded us. Now, we didn't have anything in terms of, financial stuff. We lived in a 3.5 bedroom house with one bathroom, a basement with a dirt floor. And you know what? It didn't matter because that's all we knew. I remember waking up and having bees in my bedroom because the screens were screwed up. But it's just what we knew. I killed a bat one day with a tennis racket that was flying upstairs. I think I was like 14 or something. When we get together now, we talk about those days and we just laugh. So it was good. As a kid, I was 4th out of 5. I was a very, very good athlete, but I was a product of, I think, my older siblings because they were all good athletes, including my sister. But I was the kind of kid that didn't want to disappoint. I was, I wanted to be acknowledged for what I did, and I was, I never wanted to do anything wrong. I don't know if it was insecure or what. I remember being picked on as a kid, walking down the street. And I remember the 3 guys' names. I won't mention them, but they were going to beat me up, and it was traumatic. I remember it to this day. But childhood, I think, taught me a couple things. One is ultimately respect everybody, because no matter where you are today, you can never forget where you came from. And I know a lot of people do, and I hope that I don't. But my dad was blue collar, as I said, and we had meager things. But we had love, and I think that carried us through. So I got to say, the high school years were some of the best in my life. Not so much junior high, because you're really unknown there. Junior high was, underwhelming until I got to be a freshman. And again, while I wanted to always do everything right and please everybody, I love the fact that the coaches recognized me for the talent that I had. I ran cross country. I could have played baseball and football and all that, but I ran cross country because my siblings did. And my 2 older brothers and my older sister each won a state championship in cross country. So that was the natural thing to do, right? And I remember my friends and I used to meet in the morning at Sig's grocery store, which is about 2 blocks away. We had given our clothes to Larry Lukacheski, put him in his car, and we ran to school. Physically, it was 5 miles. We got showered there, got dressed. We ran after school, And then we ran again at night. And we were crazy about it, but dedication and perseverance. I mean, we were state champs. And we did that because, we trained for it. We earned it. And I think in high school, our basketball team was so-so. It was the second game of the year. And I scored 38 points in 3 quarters. Now, remember, 3 quarters is 6-minute quarters. And all of a sudden, I was a star. And those very same kids that I mentioned a little earlier who bullied me 2 years before, now they came up to me and they wanted to be my friend. So what that meant, I think, is that I gained confidence. I gained an identity through sports. Now, sports is a great platform. I've coached a lot. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But sports is a great platform for kids to learn and grow. And I was one of those. You learn how to win and you learn how to lose. You learn about commitment and perseverance and all the things, life lessons in sports. And hopefully some of those have carried over. As I went into high school, I remember being 100 pounds as a sophomore and playing varsity basketball. Had some summer jobs that, summer jobs are good because you make money, right? But I was making $3.25 an hour and I had to wear a hard hat all day and gloves. Didn't like it. I worked at my father's precast concrete company. And one thing I learned is what I didn't want to do in my life. I didn't want to do that. Okay. But, how do you know unless you do it? Speaking of that company, one of the things that affected me in a big way in high school was that my father got laid off from that very job he had for 27 years. It was for Migley Concrete, and I think they're still around, but they laid him off after 27 years, gave him a $700 severance pay and said, "Goodbye, Phil, good luck." I saw what he had to go through, and it didn't really manifest until later, but I do know that I saw the struggle that he had because he was working for somebody else and he was at their mercy. I'm not saying having a job is bad. I'm just saying that I learned that your real security is in your ability to produce, whether that's being in business for yourself or really doing a good job for somebody else. So my father, as I said, was a blue collar guy, but he was a heck of a guy. He was probably the most humble person that I know. He was everybody's best friend because he never saw himself better than anybody else. If there's 2 things I learned from my father, and I hope that I'm even a fraction as good as he is to this day, is that humility is a great attribute, and that combined with his unbelievable work ethic made him who he was. He was loved by everybody. When I was in business in the 80s, in the 90s, he was our warehouse guy. Remember I said he lost his job and didn't know what to do, and he went out and it really hurt him and it impacted me. Eventually, one of the benefits of business is that I hired my father. And sometimes when you hire family, it's a little iffy, because what happens if things go south? Well, my father outworked everybody, including me. He was worth way, way more than he was getting paid. The good news was, got him in the Teamsters Union. He got good benefits, including health benefits. And thank goodness for that, because he didn't have it before. But I'll tell you what, he earned every single penny. Thanks, Pop. So I remember the first check I got when I worked at Migley. This is a true story. Paul Vitaliano was with me, and he was 1 year older. And we went into the bank in Clementon, New Jersey to cash our first check. So I tear the check off and I give the cashier my check, and she goes, "This is the stub. I need the other part." So I had no idea, right? But anyway, high school was good. I was recognized for things, including academics, and set me on a path to go to college. I went to Glassboro State College in Glassboro, New Jersey. It's now Rowan University. It used to be a teaching school. Now it's an engineering school, because a guy who lived in New Jersey, who had some business overseas, donated $100 million to the college or to the university back in the late 90s, and they changed the name. But Glassboro State is near and dear to me. I went there to do 2 things. One is to get a degree in teaching physical education and health, which I did, and also to play basketball. Now, I was an all South Jersey basketball player. I thought I was good. And I'm going to a D3 school, so no problem, I'll make the varsity team. I barely made the JV team. And I was athletic, but I wasn't a basketball player. And I don't blame that on anybody, but I didn't have the training that I needed. So I had a decision to make, and I was very frustrated. I was ready to quit, and if I would have quit, I'd be saying it. Yep, I quit, but I didn't. The coaches, Jack Collins and Ralph Sequella, both have had an impact on me, recognized my frustration, and they believed in me. So I stuck it out. And back then they had JV and varsity. Everybody played JV 1 year, even the best players. The second year I played JV as well. And I'm thinking, man, this is really what I want to do. Then I made the varsity team. And I got to tell you, when I think back, what I remember most is getting through that process. It was hard, right? It was hard to swallow that I wasn't the guy. But I wasn't even close until I got to my senior year, because I committed myself to getting better every year, and I had great coaching. Jack Collins, I'll tell you right now, he was a great basketball coach. He was a very tactical guy, but he knew people. He had an emotional IQ that was through the roof, and that's the mark of a good coach, or even a good businessman. And he knew how to handle people, and he handled me well. I remember having a conversation with him watching a JV game when I was a senior, and saying, Jack, he goes, Dave, you really improved. I said, Jack, anybody that comes into this program who applies themselves is going to improve. And I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, and I remember that. We both remember that. We laughed about it. But in my senior year, I did well. We did well. We won the state all 3 years. But the thing I remember is I still to this day share, believe it or not, the single season assist record. And it may not sound like much to you, but it's a lot to me, because I think it kind of describes my mentality. One is, I don't have to do all the scoring, and I couldn't anyway. But I was the guy that made other people better, right? So making people around you better feels good. And we were successful, and I had a part of that. I was like a coach on the floor. And I think Jack's influence on me is pretty much maybe what I wanted to be, a coach. So I graduated from Glassboro State College with a Bachelor of Arts degree in physical education and health teaching. Was looking for a job like everybody else, and there weren't too many around. I remember working, was painting and doing roofs with Jim Spratt, friend of my dad's, in Laurel Springs, and I got a message. My house was a little bit away, and they said, hey, somebody just called from Glassboro, and they want you to call him back. So I called back. It was Dan Stanley. He was one of my professors. He goes, Dave, how would you like to get the best job in South Jersey? And I said, absolutely. And I'm thinking it's a high school, right? It wasn't. It was an elementary school. So I went for a couple of days later to Winslow Township School number 1 and interviewed and got the job as their physical education teacher. It was great. I coached as an assistant at college, and it was an easy commute. I coached the second year at a local high school, and in that high school I coached JV, and I was promised by the superintendent that I would be the next head coach. Well, I thought that I was going to be a teacher and coach the rest of my life, and you know what? If that happened, so be it. I'd be happy. But it didn't happen that way. In 1 week during my third year of teaching, I got turned down for a $32,000 mortgage, $32,000, and I was told by one of the board members that I wasn't getting the job. I couldn't believe it. So it kind of shook me, and I started thinking, maybe you should think of a different career path. So the next year, I'm coaching, I should say I'm teaching racquetball. I was a good racquetball player, and I had to make some extra money. So at the courtrooms in Deptford, New Jersey, and met a guy named Frank, and that's all I'm going to say about him. And he had a business, and he asked me if I would come to work for him in the summer as a salesman. I said, what do you do? And he says, I'm an insulation contractor. I said, what does that mean? And he told me that they put insulations in houses and tract development. I said, I could sell that. So I went to work for him in the summer, and I quickly realized that I had a knack for sales. And I didn't know insulation from plywood, but I knew how to sell, and I caught on quickly, and he offered me a full-time job. Now here I am after teaching 4 years, expecting to go back to school, and I get offered a full-time job with a $2,000 raise and a car. And I'm like, I think I got to do this. Now I remember a friend of mine who was well-intentioned said, are you really going to give up teaching and coaching for that? And at the time I said, I need a change. Little did I know that teaching and coaching is what I've done for all my years in business. We'll get into that a little bit more, but that was an important lesson for me. And, so there, I was working for him and I met my wife, my now wife of 37 years. And we fell in love and we got married, I wouldn't say quickly, a couple of years, but we had a great relationship. And I'll say this about her, and I have a great family, 4 kids. They're all older now, but my wife is rock solid. She is super competent in whatever she does. She does a lot of volunteer stuff. She decided early on that she was going to raise the kids. Totally her decision. She could have done anything she wanted. She could have been my business partner. As a matter of fact, she is. Because when I got into business, I'll tell you that story in a second. She invested in me. I had to come up with $5,000. I didn't have it. I didn't have $5,000, but she did. This was before we were married. Anyway, we've had a long life together, and hopefully it's going to last a lot longer. But whatever I say, know that she is a big part of whatever I do. So as I said, I have 4 children. They're all grown now, but when I look back, I remember a couple things. One is the love and caring that they had for each other. And you can't teach that. It happened, and I'm happy about that. And to this day, right, they would go to any length to help one another. They're all smart, starting with Alyssa, the oldest. Then there's Davia and Taylor and Robert, twins, girl-boy twins. They've always had each other's backs, but they're good people. And when we talk about business all the time and success and how do you measure success, well, I look at them now and I see them as successful today because they care about the right things. They're all successful in their own right. They're all taking on their own path. And my wife and I couldn't be prouder to be their parents. I do recall one time, it was around the holidays, and Robert, who was probably 7 or 8 at the time, looked at me and he couldn't have been more sincere when he said, "Dad, I love it when the family's together." And I think all the kids could say that, and that about sums it up how it is for me and for them, and it doesn't get any better than that. Anyway, so I was with this guy, Frank, for about 2 years, from 1981 to 83, almost 83. And I remember I wasn't making any money selling residential insulation. So I'm driving through Philly one day, and I'm looking at these major buildings, these big skyscrapers. And I'm thinking, man, there's got to be insulation in there. So I did a little digging, and of course there was. I just didn't know about it. So one thing leads to another, and I'm bidding commercial jobs. Didn't know what I was doing. I remember meeting with a guy named Vince. Good guy, worked for a local drywall company in Philadelphia in the suburbs. And the job was called INA, and it was a semi-rigid insulation under a deck and then on exterior wall precast. And, we figured it out. But I remember going to Vince, and I didn't just send him a proposal. I went to Vince and sat down with him and said, "Look, Vince, I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, but here's my price and here's my proposal." And he goes, "Well, geez, I don't even know." I said, "Well, let me show you what I did." I showed him a comparison. I said, this is what I think it's going to cost you to do it. And I knew what the market price was for insulation. Long story short, he took it the right way. And he gave me the job. It was my first job. But I realized then that I had a knack for relationship selling. And that was the first one. Nobody taught me how to do it. I just did it. And it worked. So now I have a commercial installation job. It's in Wilmington, Delaware, and I got to do it. So we order the material, get to the job, and all of a sudden a carpenter union rep walks on the job. "Who are you?" So Nick, who was my foreman at the time, calls me up and said, "Dave, we got a little problem." I didn't know union from non-union. I had no idea. Long story short, we had to set up a separate company to do union work. It didn't last too long. We did a couple of big jobs, but pretty soon I realized that I can do what he was doing. So I started to think long and hard about starting my own business. I had no money, and I did have clients and I had a lot of goodwill. So I went to Central Jersey, talked to one of my clients. We had a good relationship, and he said, "We will back you." And I made sure that they understood that I had a 2-year non-compete. Now, remember, these are my clients. And the non-compete that I signed, that I had a copy of, said that I can't do business with existing customers or in the geographies of New Jersey, eastern 2/3 of Pennsylvania and Delaware. I said, so if you're going to back me, know this, I got to go to New York City. And they said, no problem. So they believed in me. They asked for $5,000 just as, some kind of skin in the game, I guess. My wife gave it to me. And we started a business. The good news is I got into New York City and I found that it was a ripe market for commercial insulation, which is what I did. But 2 months into the process, right, I get a call. I'm sitting at my desk in Edison, New Jersey. I get a call from a guy and he said, Mr. Procida, this is so-and-so. I represent so-and-so, and you're going to be hit with a lawsuit for, it was like $2.8 million for breach of contract. Now, I was probably worth maybe $280 at the time. So it was shocking, but I mean, I had nothing to lose. What are you going to do? Blood from a stone kind of thing. So I told my partners. They were silent, but they had their own drywall business. And we found out that my former employer did some things he shouldn't have done. So when we got to court, we threatened to countersue. And the judge said either, you drop the non-compete or you're going to get countersued. Drop the non-compete. So after 3 months, right, not 2 years, but 3 months of sitting out from doing business with my current backers and all my other clients and in my backyard, not to mention in New York, I was back in business there too. So that was a good thing. In 1985, I did it again. I said, you know what? I can do this. I can do this. So I decided to buy out my partners. Now they loaned me $50,000. They loaned me $50,000 and they did give me an opportunity. And they taught me business, best practices. I didn't know what's the difference between a receivable and a payable, but you figure it out. And in 1985, I bought them out. So I gave them their $50,000 back and an additional $1.75 million. Now, what did I learn from that? I learned a couple things. Number one, if I didn't have them as backers, I probably wouldn't have been able to buy them out no matter what I paid for them. It worked, but I could have done so much differently and so much better. I learned so much through the process. Now, I had a good lawyer, but the lawyer he knew law, but he didn't really know business. He didn't know what it was worth. So a couple things I learned. One is when you get involved in a partnership, make sure you get as much as you can. Don't take on a partner just for money because it costs you too much to get them out. And some other things that I'll share in future episodes. Suffice it to say, it worked until it didn't. Elevate. Guten Tag. Anyway, you'll get that in a minute. I've been in the air barrier business for 20 plus years, from when it was a single asphaltic, peel and stick, impermeable membrane to what it is today. It's a big part of the building science. The business has changed. There are several manufacturers in it, but I choose today to deal with Dorkin, a German-based company. Not only are they competitively priced, their technical support is great, and mainly, I can always count them. They're there when I need them, in the field or during the bid. The biggest single differentiator between Dorkin and other manufacturers is they have a simple system. An example, on a previous job, we have 5 different products to do the same thing that Dorkin gives me with 2 products. So Dorkin, I thank you for that. My workers thank you. My clients thank you. I would urge you to check Dorkin out at their website, dorken.com. That's dorken.com. So as a backdrop, I had a lot of debt service to manage with the buyout. After borrowing a lot of money from the bank, again, I had to figure out how to pay for that, and the insulation business wasn't big enough to do it. So I started an erecting business. We erected prefabricated panels in New Jersey. Carpenters came to me, said, these panels that are being made with steel studs in a shop all over the place are all being erected by iron workers. We want some representation. Dave, would you do it? So we figured it out and we did it. That led to erecting curtain wall. Picture this. Curtain wall in New York City, 60, 70 stories worth of glass and stone and whatever it is. I ended up erecting that stuff. The company called Collier Associates was the big erector in town. They went out of business. I had clients in Goodwill. They came to me and said, "Dave, can you get in this business?" And I said, "Yeah, under two conditions. One is I do a T&M, and two is you pay me weekly," which was it was a boon. It was unbelievable. So I recruited the right people, put the right people in business, hired a guy as a partner, and it was working like crazy. So I did that like 5 times. We were doing steel erecting, we were doing precast erecting, asbestos removal, and stonework in New York City, of all things, right? So it was great. Built the backlog up, doing 25 million in 1991 and making money. And I said, this is easy. But it wasn't, because it was all predicated on being able to grow in business. And the business basically stopped. It fell off a cliff in late 91. So 92 comes and we're struggling. People aren't paying, all this stuff. And the bank walks in, National Westminster Bank, who had, I think I had a line with them about 1.8 million at the time. And they came in and said, "Mr. Procida, we are not going to renew your loan." Now, the loan was due for renewal in 2 months. So this was like in February of 92. And so I had 2 months to figure this out. I had one business that was going south. We had to end it. We wound it down. We paid everybody. Another business wound down, but it took longer. Point was, it was no fun winding down a business, but I had a choice to make. I could either bankrupt those companies and hurt everybody in the process that were owed money, or, which is what I did, take my assets in the other business and pay off the debt over here. Essentially, I lost my entire net worth in a period of 3 months in 1992. It was all she wrote. But it was a decision I made, and I'm happy I made a decision. I'm not looking for a pat on the back because of it. It's just what I did. And, you keep a good name and goodwill in the business, and hopefully things come back. But it was the right thing to do. I remember the bank coming in and saying, "Our auditors think that you're going to be able to pay back $350,000 of your $1.8 million loan, right?" And I laughed. I literally laughed. I said, "Well, I can do a lot better than that." Well, we'll see. So at the end of a couple things. One is the bank wanted their money first. I said, no. I said, the vendors are getting their money first. You're getting your money second. Number two, I'm starting a new company over here because I had all this good business to do, but I couldn't do it with the existing company because everything was cross-collateralized. I couldn't get financing to do it. So I started the new company. And at first people said, you're running from your creditors. No, exactly the opposite. I did it so I could finish this work over here that was good and collect those receivables and pay off the bad debt in the companies that were pretty much defunct. That's what I did. That's how basically I went from here to here. But it was all good. So trying to get financing in a struggling business is not easy. I couldn't go to the banks. I worked out some terms with vendors, but the big thing that happened was I went to a friend, and this will give you an idea of the power of people who believe in you. I went to Wes Wyatt. He was a contractor originally from Pittsburgh, came to the Philadelphia market, and we met. I did business with him. We had a good friendship. And he trusted me, and I trusted him. So I went to Wes. I said, "Wes, I need to talk." He says, "Come on in, Dave, what's up?" I said, "Wes, I'm struggling, man." He goes, "How bad?" I said, "Really bad." He goes, "What do you need?" I said, 200. He goes, "Hang on a second." He gets on his phone, dials up an extension, calls Jim Groshian, who was his controller. I said, "Jim, write a check for $200,000 to," he looks at me, he goes, "Dave, do you want it to you or do you want it to the company?" I said, "No, to the company, Wes." He goes, "Make it out to the company." 2 minutes later, Jim walks in with a $200,000 check, asked me how I was doing. I said, "Great." He left. It was amazing. It's like lifeblood. And all I can say is, Wes, thank you. You were a lifesaver, and I'll never forget it. Now, we paid Wes back, and had no promissory note or anything. We paid him back with interest in about 8 months. But I don't know what I would have done without it. When you go through tough times, sometimes you find out a lot about people. And there's one person that I want to shout out, if that's the right expression, and that's Bob Dunlap. Bob came to me quite interestingly, through a default of another company that we had hired to do some work, and they stiffed us for some money, but Bob worked for them. They went out of business, and we got Bob. And Bob was a true tradesman. He was really good, smart in the field, but he was so personable. I got along with him, one of my good friends then. And when things went south, Bob was one of a very few people who stood by me, understood, and did what he had to do to make things work. Bob became part of the resurrection of the business, but he's also been a lifelong friend, and to this day, Bob and I meet, every once in a while to talk. We laugh all the time. I'm thankful for people like Bob. Over the next couple years, once I got through that nightmare, and it was an expensive education, but it was a good one because that kind of set the stage for, what was to come. So we shrunk, got back to our core business. I opened up an office in DC. I got tired of driving back and forth, so I moved the family down there in 1995. And in the next 5 years, we had New Jersey operating and DC operating. We built it back up. And in 2000, I was part of a roll-up where a public company, Masco Contractor Services, bought my company. And I remember Scott Nicholson from United Jersey Bank. He was a friend. And the banker, he calls me up, he goes, Dave, the money just got there. It was incredible. It changed things, but that was the last day that I owned my business. So now I am the division manager at Capital Installation Services, and I have a boss, and he has a boss, and he has a boss. And it wasn't bad, but it wasn't very challenging for me. Luckily at the time, I coaching, it's a funny story how I got into coaching a couple years earlier. My son, who was 6 at the time, had a Saturday practice, and his coach didn't show up. So I walked on the field and took over, and literally, I just never left. I wasn't a soccer coach. I didn't know soccer from anything. I was a basketball player, and I would coach basketball today if I could. But soccer was a game that my kids loved, and it was a growing sport. So I learned through the sport and through, clinics and things like that, and eventually got a C license, which most college coaches don't have, because I cared and I wanted to be good at it. But through those years, now, if you go to like 2001, I became the president of the club. So I go from coaching a U16 in 1997 to the president of the club in 2001. Now there's 6,000 kids in this club. And it was great because there was a place for every level, whether you're really, really good or you just want to, go there and play with your friends and pick daisies. It didn't matter. The problem we had is that we didn't have a field complex, and we had the money. The people before me, way before me, Louise Waxler and many others I can mention, I don't want to miss anybody, but they had saved money to buy property so they can build their own fields, because we had to go to the high schools, the Board of Education. We had to work through them and get these crappy fields with lumpy grass. It was bad. But we couldn't find a decent property in Howard County, Maryland. So I get a call from a banker, and he said, hey, Dave, you might want to consider talking to Covenant Baptist Church. And Covenant Baptist Church at the time, they had a new minister, and his name was Dan Crow. So I met with Dan, and he had a big piece of property, but he didn't have any money. So they were renting out space at a local high school to do their Sunday services. And we got to talking, why don't we buy the property from you, lease back 8 acres, you have money, and you'll be able to build your church. We're going to develop this land into soccer fields, right? So we're going to bring the community to you. We're going to share the parking, the cost of the parking and the lights. We're going to build a clubhouse. That was a private partnership, and at the time, it may still be the largest privately funded complex, at least in the Mid-Atlantic. And I was proud to be a part of that. I didn't do it alone, but I was in the right spot at the right time. I had the right skill set. I wasn't a developer. I was more of a builder. But my friend Brian Gibbons was a developer. He had like 6 kids all in the program. I said, Brian, can you help us do this? So for nothing, right? He assigned a project manager, got all this. These are the things I didn't know. But we built the Soccer Associate of Columbia home fields, 10 fields. I'm proud of that. To this day, I haven't had anything to do with the club in a long time. But that is something that we always said will live well beyond us. And again, to this day, it's something I look back on and I smile. Mark Twain once said, and I'm serious, it's the clothes that make the man. Naked people have little or no influence on society. The wardrobe was provided by Benchmark Clothiers, custom clothes to fit your lifestyle. You can find them on Facebook and Instagram at Benchmark Clothiers. And when you go there, tell them Dave sent you. Now, coaching is a different story. I said I started coaching with my son, but I coached at every level in the club. And it's really a part of who I am. And a friend of mine recently said, it's all about coaching and business for you, right? I said, yeah, it's the same thing, right? In business, you take your team, right? You establish where you want to go. You take your team, you put them in a position where they can succeed. You manage the moving parts, right? You empower them. You challenge them. You tell them that you did a good job. It's no different whether you do it in business or on the field. It's the same thing, different venue. I've had a lot of success coaching high school girls too. And I think I look back, my favorite part was not my first tenure coaching in high school, where we ended up losing in the state final in PKs, yes. It was the second tenure where my daughter was actually the head coach and I was her assistant. Now, this is crazy, but at the time I was working and my office building was literally across the fence from the field. She said, Dad, I'll take this job if you help me coach. We coached for 4 years together. Phenomenal. We also lost in the state finals on PKs, but that's neither here nor there. As my kids got older, they went to college, we were kind of empty nesters, and I'm thinking, it's probably time to move on and get back into business because I was really focused on the community stuff. So I decided I was going to get back in business. I left Masco Contractor Services after serving as their commercial business manager for 2 years. They weren't really interested at the time to build commercial. They were 90% residential, and they wanted a commercial guy, and I was the guy. So it was cool for like a couple of years. I was flying around the country, but there was no way to scale it up. I sent a letter to the president of the company and said, look, you got to tell me two things. One is how big do you want to get? And two is how fast do you want to get there? Then I'll tell you what kind of resources I need. Because at the time it was three of us, me, myself, and I, and it just wasn't working. I never heard back. I left in February of 2008 under good terms, and I was going to get back into my own business. Right? I had a little non-compete. I was going to navigate that. So I met a friend and a client, Art Dorner from Component Assembly Systems. We met in Vegas, had dinner, and I said, Art, I'm going to be knocking on your door again. He goes, what do you mean? I said, I left Masco. Are you kidding me? He goes, come to work for us. And I'm like, geez, let me think about it. So it was a fine line trying to navigate, wanting to be in my own business because I knew how to make money versus going to work for a big company. They were big. They were probably the second or third largest drywall company in the country. And I sat on that for like 2 months, and they finally said, come on up here. Let's make a deal. So I did. And we did. And it was a great deal. They were so good to me. It's a family business. And they didn't always agree with me. I don't always agree with them, but I have nothing but good things to say about them and fond memories. I learned a lot there. I became the executive vice president of commercial business development. And basically what I did was I helped leverage the best practices of each division. And we opened up Philadelphia office with John Yike and Matt Andrews. And we went out and opened up an office in LA. I loved it. It was great. But there came a time around 2015, right? I was there 7 years, that I was itching to do something else. Simultaneous with that, Masco Contractor Services, who were part of Masco, they were like a $2.5 billion piece of a $12 billion company. They realized that, through the downturn, it probably wasn't a good time to be in this situation, in this relationship. So they decided that it would be best if they divested and became their own company. So this is going on in like 2014. I don't know anything about it, but I get a call from them saying, hey man, we would like you to consider coming back. And I said, at first I said, look, I love the business and I love what you're saying, but there's no way it's going to happen. Well, it did happen. I left Component on good terms, joined what's called Top Build. True Team is the operating arm of Top Build in 2015. 15 as their commercial business development manager. And it was like the perfect job for me. It was a combination of being a contractor and being a teacher. I was able to develop what we call the hub. And the hub was like the brain trust. And we would support divisions in their efforts to get better. Long story short, we booked a lot of business. We changed the way the proposals were made and how people bid jobs and what scopes of work they were doing. And I was really happy and proud to be part of it. And it ended in 2018, and it was kind of a weird ending, but where one door closes and another door opens. And that brings me to now. Adacorp Construction Services LLC. We are a consulting business that focuses on commercial contractors. We do a lot with sales and acquisitions, as well as business development and everything in between. I'm really happy about where I am, and I'll say this in my whole life. I said, everywhere I've gone, I've been challenged and I've learned. Even at my age, learning is critical to me being happy. And I've learned so much about prefabrication, about rain screen, and all the things you'll be able to see once you look at my website. So, in review, I worked for somebody for 4 years. I had my own business for 15. I worked for either a public or a private company for the next, 15 years. And it was amazing in terms of what I learned and all the different management styles. I'm fortunate, but that's what brings me here today. And now we're doing a podcast. So, it's a kind of a circuitous route. It's been a great, great ride. So somebody asked me how I balance, work and family and just having fun. And, talk about the family is a good example would be when my oldest daughter, Alyssa, was in high school, and right before the Iraqi war was building up. She was a Democrat, my wife's Democrat, and I at the time was a Republican. And I swore we were going to find weapons of mass destruction. And we joke about it to this day. But Alyssa organized a school-wide walkout in, a conjunction with the administration. So it was well done. And my wife and I were supporting. So we supported all our kids, not just coaching them, but my wife did a ton of things with the PTA and volunteer work with the school. It was amazing. But we always had our kids at the center of everything. To the point where at the end of the walkout, if I continue that story, the Baltimore Sun came up, found my wife and I, and we started asking questions about how do you guys handle it at the dinner table? And we talked about it, that we respect each other, we love each other, we agree to disagree. Not so much today with the way the country is, but that's the way we are, and we're going to stay that way. Now, as far as what I do for fun, it usually revolved around either coaching, and we talked about that already, but let's talk about the sports side. I'm an athlete like my dad, like my older brothers and sisters, I told you, and I relax through sports. And, it started with basketball we talked about in college, and then it turned into racquetball, where I became a tournament racquetball player, and hit softball, and then I started skiing. Skiing was great. It was a great family sport, and we did it together. Running, good story, right? I'm going to start running when I'm 31. Now, I ran competitively in high school, but I started running to lose weight. I ran by myself. I swore I wasn't going to wear a watch or clock my miles. I didn't want to get anal about it. So 9 months later, I'm running the New York Marathon in the best shape of my life. That's who I am. I get onto something and I squeeze everything I can out of myself. After skiing, it was golf and then tennis, and then I got into mountain biking. 5 or 6 years with my old buddies. It was amazing. And back to golf again. But that is how I relax, and how I think it's just indicative of who I am. I try to get the most out of myself no matter what I do. And a couple things about me you'll know is when I set out to do something, I take it to an extreme, whether it's business, whether it's podcasting, or whether it's sports. It doesn't matter. I think success is something different to everybody. And it should be. But success to me, it's about getting the most out of yourself. Remember in college where I almost quit, but I just wrung every little bit I could out of myself. Success to me is picking a venue, right? Whether it's a job, you might be working a job and you could be happy. That's okay. Do as much as you can to be as good as you can. And success to me is just that. Now, could I have made more money? Absolutely. But I probably would have never coached. That's my path. That's not the right path. It's not the wrong path. That's the path that I took. So here we are with the podcast. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about me. I hope that you choose to tune in the future. Check out the website for the dates. Stay tuned, stay safe, and we'll talk soon. Elevate, 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 elevate. All the music for the episodes, including our theme song Elevate, was provided by DMV producer Trey Skills. If you like what you heard, follow Trey Skills on Instagram at Trey Skills, TreySkillz. That's TreySkillz. So follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Elevate Industry. Check out my YouTube channel at Commercial Construction, Elevate the Industry. Visit my website, adicorp.com, ADICORP.com. Go to LinkedIn, search for David Procida, hit connect, and follow me. Please rate, review, and comment on this episode, and I look forward to seeing you next week.